This is episode 688 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Well, Wally, a little different concept as we get a double dose of Paul and Wally this week. We're going to do a pretty deep dive into taxes, specifically New Mexico and state tax policy for this particular episode. Part of this is driven by the fact that I am speaking with the Americans for Prosperity organization on March 8th. That's this Saturday. I'll be starting off. They'll have lunch at 11:30 and the event lasts till 1:30. I will speak for maybe 45 minutes to an hour of it. You can find details about this event, sign up, find the contact information at heirsoфenchantment.com. It's not right at the very, very top. You might have to go down a little bit, but it's Let's Talk Taxes. There's a big picture of the event, details and whatnot, and AFP's offices are off of Central near UNM, 3339 Central Avenue Southeast. So let's get after it here. And I guess I'll say the first thing, which is, taxes are kind of the fundamental aspect of government. They're important because without taxes, without revenue, government can't do anything. And as a libertarian, sometimes I think, yeah, that's the thing, is just completely eliminate taxes at all levels and go from there. But that, I believe, is balanced out by nothing is for sure besides death and taxes. And it's hard to imagine not having taxes in the future, in the not too distant future. So a couple of basic points before we get into the data. Taxes should be fair and consistent. They should be transparent. They, generally speaking, should be consistent. You shouldn't have one donut, for example, taxed and a bagel not taxed. That would be inconsistent tax policy. But ultimately, taxes should be enough to fund the core functions of government, not just everything but the kitchen sink. And, we have in New Mexico specifically government that far outstrips the necessary size of government, and yet we still have plenty of money left over. So before I hand it to you, Wally, I'm looking at a report. It's an infographic based on Wallet Hub information, which first and foremost, they look specifically at income, property, and sales taxes for this, which in New Mexico leaves something out. But ultimately, New Mexico's tax burden is considered to be in the middle of the pack by Wallet Hub at 8%. Arizona's at 7.8, Utah's at 9.4, Colorado 8.4, Texas 7.6, Oklahoma 7.0, New York very high, New Hampshire on the very low end in terms of taxes. But that does not tell, as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story, which is that New Mexico's government spending is quite high. According to a paper that we haven't quite released yet, one of the things that we share in that is that New Mexico's expenditures are 21.7% as a percentage of New Mexicans' incomes. In the Southwest, that's 13.1%. And in the U.S., it's an average of 15.1%. So our spending is very high, and our taxes are not especially high. More to follow, but react to that, Wally.
All right. Well, my first my first thought, Paul, is it called to mind, and I am a recovering CPA, so I've actually taken a tax class or two, and I was when you were talking, I looked up in the 1819 Supreme Court case, McCulloch versus Maryland. Chief Justice John Marshall used the phrase, "The power to tax is the power to destroy." And so, do we need taxes to fund government? Yes, we do need taxes to fund government. But even back in 1819, the thought was there could be too much of a good thing and you need to be careful. And so, as I
Well,
was,
you're calling taxes a good thing. I just want to get you on the record here.
taxes are a good thing at the proper level.
Okay.
Yep, I will say that. Absolutely, they're at the proper level. And the proper level in New Mexico is probably about 50 to 100, cut them in half in New Mexico. That would be the proper level in New Mexico. New Mexico's taxes are way too high, particularly given what the options we have to raise revenue. And the big issue is if you think about it, look across the country at the states that have the highest tax burden. Do they have the best public services? Are they the best run states? Are they the states that do the things that these taxes are supposed to provide? Good schools, low crime rates, good health care, et cetera, et cetera. And, just looking around at the places that have the highest tax rates, the Californias, New York, Illinois of the world, and there are others, but their tax rates and their total taxation tends to be pretty darn high, and their services pretty abysmal. Uh, Look at places like Florida and Texas where they have lower taxes. I don't think their taxes could be called really, really low because they both have their ways of raising revenue. Texas, in particular, in the form of the property tax, is a big component there. But even though the taxes are lower, you don't have any degradation of services. In some cases, the services are a lot better. And then the other thing that high taxes breed is more government employees that have government pensions that are a bunch of unfunded mandates, the ticking time bombs in a lot of cases of promises that government makes that they don't really have a way to repay them. And that's what happens in high tax states with an asterisk. New Mexico is the asterisk state. And the other one is
Wow.
probably Alaska for the same reason, and that is there's a lot of oil and gas, and so a industry produces a lot of taxation that isn't paid by the individuals or the vast majority of corporations or all the places that taxes are collected. So we are in a position, we are in the catbird seat here in New Mexico to be able to do tax policy that just absolutely makes our state the place you want to come and do business. But for some reason, I don't think we've been moving in that direction. And for those that say, well, you need to bring these up ideas in time to do something about it, well, it's March 5th, 2025. Maybe by the next session of the legislature, they'll be ready to go on some of these tax proposals and some of these tax reform efforts that I think are badly needed in New Mexico.
Well, uh, so taxes perform a useful role in our society. At least that is, I think, our safe position. We're not going with the anarchist position, the hardcore libertarian position that all taxation is theft and that it's inherently evil. I think it's hard to really illustrate the difference between taxes and theft, but it's kind of like the old line about pornography. You know it when you see it. Government can engage in forms of theft, including taxation, and it is worth noting that, of course, right now, New Mexico has an incredible opportunity to address its tax situation. Now, at the Rio Grande Foundation, over the years, we've testified and worked on a wide variety of issues, from regulations like right to work and Davis-Bacon that affect labor, minimum wage, to the education system and the way that it operates. But right now, in the Rio Grande Foundation's a strategic organization. When you have lots and lots of money, as New Mexico does, you have a opportunity to use that money. Now, we've talked about the convoluted way in which New Mexico's revenues from oil and gas are derived, but we are the number 2 oil producing state in the nation. I've got charts upon charts, including from the Energy Information Administration, showing that our revenues are driven by production. So prices is important. It can't drop to $0 or $10 a barrel, but we have plenty of money coming from oil and gas and multi-billion dollar budgets. So with that being said, and while we could have a whole conversation about spending and kind of the wasteful spending, and New Mexico does spend a lot of money, we're just going to focus on taxes. Now, I sent you a chart, Wally, that I think is very important. It kind of looks at when the academics get together and they talk about taxes, they look at taxes as a few different components. One is you have corporate taxes. Taxing corporations is the most harmful, generally recognized among economists, tax that is done by government. It's by no means the most revenue. I think in New Mexico, it's somewhere on the order of $350 million. But you would do the most economic good for the dollar of tax cut if you went ahead and eliminated New Mexico's corporate income tax. Why is that a good idea? Why is that a challenging idea?
Well, I think it's a good idea because I think the sustainability of that and the risk that the state faces were it to eliminate income taxes is extraordinarily low.
You mean because of the limited loss of revenue?
The limited loss of revenue and the good that it does when people are looking at states to move to retire, places to go to start, grow, or expand their businesses. So, and I think it's relatively easy to understand as well. So, all of those things make that, in my opinion, a good thing to do. Regular listeners to the podcast will not be surprised to know that were I made to be king of taxation in New Mexico for a short period of time, I would definitely restructure the gross receipts tax.
Well, hold on.
But that is not what we're talking about, evidently. So
yes.
That's next. But
the primary problem, let's just say it, is politically. The political benefit, because corporations don't vote, individuals vote. Now, states that don't have a personal income tax also don't have, by and large, a corporate income tax. And you could argue that is maybe the supercharging behind the lack of a personal income tax. But if, economically speaking, if we're just talking economics, not politics, eliminating the corporate income tax is the number one thing to do. Now, secondly,
and Paul, I would say yes, but and New Mexico gets an asterisk. Because our gross receipts tax is so horrendous. If our gross receipts tax was a sales tax like most other states, I would have no argument. But I think in my mind, and again, I don't have the study in front of me to prove that because nobody likes to study New Mexico's gross receipts tax except the Rio Grande Foundation.
Right.
I think that, so I could live with that, even with that number one would be income tax.
Now, eliminating the personal income tax is generally recognized as the next most viable. Now, you get a lot more revenue. The state of New Mexico derives $2.1 billion from the personal income tax. Now, when I went up to testify on HB 275, the fiscal impact report came back at $3.8 billion. You say, how the heck is that? Well, a lot of what you call refundable tax credits And then if corporations, organized under the corporate tax law, switch over to the personal income tax law, uh, then you get a bigger revenue hit to the state. But widely recognized personal income tax is the next best way to go, joining 9 other states that have no personal income tax. Uh, Briefly, Wally, what is attractive about the personal income tax being eliminated in a given state?
Well, the best poverty reduction program is a job, and the best way to raise wages is to not take them from your citizens. It makes their jobs even more valuable. So that's kind of where I start off with that. From a policy point of view, eliminating in New Mexico, guess what, folks? We don't have many corporations that pay very much corporate income tax. It's very, very low. And when recessions hit, corporations and businesses, a lot of times they get to where they don't pay any income tax because they don't have any net income. Whereas individuals that are receiving salaries in particular, not the flow through entities like the partnerships or the LLCs and those, that's a different ball of wax. But everyone who receives a paycheck, they pay tax whether the economy is good or not. And so, um, from a just helping the citizens, it definitely helps directly. But as you said, the number one, if we were to, it's it's unfortunately it would actually do more good for more people, I think, to reduce the corporate income tax than to reduce the personal income tax. But again, back to the politics of it, it's a lot easier to talk about reducing or eliminating personal income tax than it is corporate. But New Mexico, man, we got to do something to make our business environment go forward, which is why I still think eliminating all income taxes might be the way to go.
Yeah, and one of the big reasons why conservatives support uh, personal income tax elimination or reduction wherever possible is because humanity and human nature does not have an inherent desire to work hard. They will consume, but working is not necessarily something that we all want to do. Government should not impose restrictions or barriers between people working and getting that money, that hit of adrenaline or dopamine when they get that paycheck, because you're already dealing with a human behavior that is not necessarily high on the list of things that people want to do. Now, the next one is the consumption tax. And we've kind of already discussed it very briefly, but a consumption tax is the third option. Now, the problem with the gross receipts tax in New Mexico is that it's not just a consumption tax. Uh, if we went, as you and I have discussed for many, many years, to a straight sales tax from a consumption, from the gross receipts tax, I should say, uh, that would more classically be a consumption tax. But the current approach that we have is not transparent, not equitable or equal in its treatment of various goods and services. It specifically hinders business in a very unique way that is in many ways more harmful than a corporate income tax, and it's just very confusing because of its unique properties. So, uh, I think that is where you get that New Mexico asterisk. But in a typical state, uh, more conservatives and more, I think, good tax policy people are okay with a consumption tax. The gross receipts tax is an abomination.
Yeah, I agree with the abomination. And then, not to overly confuse things, but we could go to a European style value added tax, which is kind of a consumption tax. But along the way, in a value added tax, you get to take into account the fact that it's been paid before. And so in New Mexico, we wake up in a new world, and so we have the pyramiding, pancaking, layering, so that even though a business might only be paying on certain services 7% gross receipts tax, because of how it works, the person providing that service to the business has already paid gross receipts tax. So it doubles the pain. It's almost like the difference between the stated mileage on the sticker. We think this vehicle is going to get 30 miles to the gallon, and in how you drive it around town, it gets 10 or 15. Well, the effective real rate of tax from the gross receipts tax isn't the 7 or 8% sticker price. It's a whole heck of a lot, because many business transactions, it's paid multiple times.
And from an economist perspective, the final tax is the property tax. Now, New Mexico does have low property taxes relative to most other states. That doesn't mean that everybody pays low property taxes, but um, they're they're relatively transparent. I would say that a sales tax is in a way that a gross receipts tax is not, but it ultimately is a wealth tax to a great extent, and it is very unpopular with the people who pay it, which is, one of those things that you want to balance. If the wool can be taken too easily off of the sheep, then, and I'm not calling anybody out there sheep, but if it is too easy to get revenue from the people by government, it is a problem. It is something that tax policy folks, Grover Norquist, et cetera, we all look at in terms of, if you really want government supercharged and to grow and to be able to, be the nanny state that most of us do not want it to be, then make it very easy for the government to gain large amounts of revenue. That's the evil of tax withholding and the income tax at the federal level. Uh, but property taxes are relatively transparent, and because you tend to write a big check for them, uh, or see them on a statement of your tax bill, they are something that widely is considered the least bad tax, plus the wealth aspect. That you're not disincentivizing somebody from getting a job or making an income. To the extent that property taxes disincentivize something, it's property ownership. Now, do I like low property taxes better than high property taxes? Of course I do. But this is the argument that you see in tax policy.
Yeah, and something that I guess when I think about it, I should have realized this, but because property taxes are a form of wealth tax, guess what? If you have a wealth tax on something, the value of what that asset is tends to be lower. And sure enough, in places like Texas that have very high property taxes on residential real estate, the value of residential real estate is lower. Because, just think of it from the point of view as, to buy a home, you need most people finance, and to buy a home, you need to pay principal, interest, insurance, and the like. But if your property taxes are very, very high, you have less money that's available to pay the loan, and as a result, the values tend to be a little lower. I don't think we're at that big place in New Mexico right now. Our big thing is, I think our property taxes are fine. With the asterisks is, but for the fact that we have so many other horrific taxes that get added on to it, I don't think the problem in and of itself is probably the real estate tax or the property tax. And
Well,
then,
I will say really quickly that there are too many special interest deductions and advantages. Now, we can talk about
yeah,
churches, for example, which don't pay property taxes, but government is the real culprit here through things like industrial revenue
right.
bonds and various other tax advantages that can ultimately eliminate personal income taxes on some of the biggest potential property taxpayers in our state. And that that is where the problem arises. Of course, voters just this past year gave some very favorable tax breaks to veterans and some other folks, and those are certainly a reasonable tax policy. But uh, I think we could use a real look at those tax exemptions given to certain businesses as a tool for economic development, whether that's the way we need to go.
Yeah, and that is a good point. So, in general, I have always, particularly because the state of New Mexico has proven to be so horrible at picking winners and losers. If we had just a low tax environment, low tax, low regulation, and again, regulations are good until they're not. We have too many of them in New Mexico. But if we had low or no income tax, reformed gross receipts tax, heck, I don't think we'd need to spend nearly as much money as we do, if any, to get these businesses to come to the state. And
Ding, ding,
then,
ding. Yes.
then we have the ultimate bad economic trade-off, and that is the film industry.
Right.
We not only don't really charge them anything, we give them huge amounts of money, and they come here. And we act surprised that they do. We're like, well, yeah, this is a great industry because it provides lots of jobs. Well, it provides jobs. I don't disagree, but they tend to be transitory. A lot of them tend to go back to Los Angeles or overseas or other places. But what the key is that's economics. What could that level of funding do for our state if we were to put it into, say, reduction or elimination of income tax? Would be a far better way to do it.
Yeah, it's safe to say that our tax burden is too heavy. It is one of the fundamental things that does hold New Mexico back. And if you want to see that film cost, it is actually taken out of the budget through the corporate income tax revenue. So it actually comes right out of that line item in the state budget. But we're going to leave things there for the time being. I hope this has been informative and kind of understanding a little bit more about New Mexico's tax structure and problems.
And you've been warned. If you see me at a bar and you ask me a tax question, I'll probably have something to say about it. So,
all right. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.